Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Octant community meeting. Today is February 26th, 2020, and per usual, we have a bunch of things to go through on the agenda. If you want to add anything to the agenda as a discussion topic or otherwise, please do so. I'm sharing the agenda in the chat there. If you have any questions or comments throughout the meeting, please just unmute yourself if you have anything you want to add. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see the agenda as well. And if you're not talking, please make sure you're muted. So let me share my screen. All right. So for the agenda today, we're going to go through a bunch of bug fixes and updates, talk a little about the nightlies, and then a proposal review as well. And we do have an open Q&A at the end here with dependency updates from Milan. All right, who's up first?
I can kick it off. So yeah, I wanted to initially just cover some of the latest fixes since the last time we all spoke. There was a few that were actually impacting folks directly. One is the first one. There's a new feature that Brian added. It came in as a request from quite a few people who are authoring plugins. But this is the ability to update the summary section of a component. And what this allows you to do is to take information useful to your plugin and insert it into the summary section, such as links to other information or call to actions for the user. So Brian was in the process of working on a plugin and needed this feature, and went ahead and implemented it alongside the fix that Sam did. This actually adds quite a bit of new functionality to plugins, because if you go to the next issue in the list, which is 728, plugins really weren't able to add, if you had more than one plugin that was adding a tab to the same object, you just got duplicate plugin tabs. We were holding on to a reference so we were looping through the plugins that were installed and we were adding the tabs. The problem was we were holding on to the reference of the first tab that we grabbed and just appending it over and over. So if you had 3 plugins installed, you got 3 plugin tabs from, I think, either the first plugin or the last plugin that was in the list. I don't remember which direction it was going, but now it works. So Sam fixed that up. So now you can actually have multiple plugins adding multiple tabs for the same object, as well as your plugins updating the summary component. So this is really useful for anyone who's writing plugins, especially if you're dealing with the built-in objects. And then the final thing that is a new feature is the status indicators for text components. A lot of our, as Brian mentions here with conditions, a lot of our text components are used in places that have double negatives. For example, in this case, it's a positive thing, but the status is false. So being able to put a success or I think okay status on that, so it shows up with a green indicator, so that you know this is visually, it helps kind of indicate that it's a successful thing. We'll probably look at extending this and changing the shapes of each of the statuses so that it's not solely dependent on the color. But for now, it is just a color dot. So, but that's a accessibility thing that we'll address later with this feature. So that is also a useful thing. You can take advantage of this in plugins as well if you're rendering out any text components. So to go back to being able to update the summary, you could now insert your own text component into the summary around some type of custom resource or some object that you're fetching from some remote third-party API, and provide some type of indicator status along with that text. So all 3 of these combined make for some really useful patterns that people can now use within Octant. We covered the logging updates last time, and there has been a few more. We have fixed the logging tab under Azure Kubernetes, Azure, whatever. AKS. We fixed the logging tab there. We've added some case-sensitive filtering output for the regex matching on the search box that's now under logging. Milan was doing that work. And then we've also added when you're searching and you use the forward and back buttons, you'll wrap on your searches now instead of just like hitting the end or hitting the top. So it feels more like your standard native searching in any type of system. So Milan, do you have anything to add for that?
You covered it pretty much all. Yeah, we added the support for ANSI scapegoats. Yeah, there were some other minor enhancements, like layout of the search window and things like that. So I think this epic is in a pretty good shape. I think the only remaining thing is the one we're going to cover is combining the logs and making sure those get in. We'll talk about that later. But other than that, I think the logging tab looks pretty good.
Yeah, great. Sam, did you have anything that you wanted to call out with related to fixes or updates?
There is there is one. I wrote an issue for it before this meeting, so it's not on the agenda, but it's the idea of adding weights to plugin authors for their items. And the idea is that currently right now, if you add a new item into a component, it'll just automatically be on the bottom. And there is some logic for tiebreakers of like titles and component widths, but someone might just want something to the very top. And so if this is interesting, I'm just throwing the issue out there. And I guess if someone's interested on it, just sort of leave a comment and we'll see, because this will also be another breaking API change.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I get that added to the notes so that people can find it easy. I wanted to do a quick call out as a reminder that we have nightly builds. So a lot of folks were asking, when's the next release? When can I get that fix that you just put in that fixed my thing? And I will say that our nightly builds, though they're not always going to be perfect, they are a pretty good option for getting early access to Octant features. Our release cadence is not one that is specifically tied to any set of features or any set of like we push once a week, we push every 2 weeks, and the reason for that is because Octant is and will be an application, and that application will be updating automatically, right? So putting in a whole process in place around releasing, like having a structured release cadence, and we ship releases of Octant every X weeks or whatever, is something that we're not really investing a lot into right now, because we don't need to invest into it in the future, especially as we hit 1.0. Now, with saying that, I will call out that our plugin API will be versioned, and releases that impact the plugin API will be explicit. They'll be called out. There'll be deprecation periods, and so around our public APIs with plugins, we will have some structured things, but the releases themselves are likely going to move to a more in-app update approach as soon as the Electron side of things have come along a little bit further. So I highly recommend people take a look at nightly builds when there's a feature that you really want to get access to, and you want to get access to it very quickly. Okay, so the next thing is I wanted to do a proposal review. So this is something that we've done in the past a little bit, but we're going to start doing more of. So first, I just want to give some basically set the tone for what a proposal review will look like on these calls. And then I'll go ahead and dive into doing a review of the combined logging proposal. So
Wayne,
yeah,
just before you start, do you want to share your screen so you can go through the different aspects of it?
Yeah, I can do that. I don't need to share my screen right now, but I will as soon as I pull this up. So the way we're going to be doing, we have a section in our contributing guide, which actually, let me share my screen so I can show that. Hold on. It's always, Jonas is always right. What am I sharing? Okay, you see the browser window now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Let's go here. Let's go here. So in our contributing guide, we have this section that talks about proposals. And so we are going to try and be doing more of this. Basically, consider making a proposal for any feature that is a body of work that is going to probably take more than even just a day or two. Then it probably needs a proposal, and so it needs to be thought about a little bit. So with that said, a proposal review during these community meetings, that's essentially going to be mostly a one-way presentation of a person showing you all of the work that and thought and effort they've put into a thing, and allowing you to go to their pull request, read it further, and then have comments and input on it. We are not going to have really a lot of back and forth on proposal reviews during this meeting, mainly because it's the first time you're seeing the thing from a person. And we want to avoid reactionary opinions, and we want to avoid things that like, oh, have you tried this? Did you think of this? Like maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Maybe it just didn't make it into their document. But the place for all of that conversation is on the issue itself. So, so for anyone who, and I think, well, I will try, not think, I will add a little bit more detail around that into our contributing document so that people understand what like asking for a proposal review on this meeting means and looks like, and so they can be not. I know a lot of people are a little tentative to want to do something like this in a public setting, but rest assured, it will, as long as I'm part of the meeting, it will not be a bike shed on your proposal. It'll be you presenting the thought and work that you've done to a group of people, and then they will take and do their work to go comment and make suggestions. So that, I just wanted to set it up so that people kind of understood how things are kind of going to work with our proposal reviews. And with that, I will, unless there's anything that someone wants to add or ask about, I will move on to talking about combined logging. Okay. So combined logging, this came up when we were working on the logging epic, and it was a feature request that we've had in the queue for a while. The idea here is that it's the ability to view all the container logs for a given workload. Currently, you have to request each container log separately. This is not generally a workflow that a lot of people use. Most people, even when they're typing kubectl commands, tend to just default to all logs. A lot of people have aliases, so it's all logs. And then they use their command line tooling, grep and ack and things like that, to filter the results of the output, to limit it to certain containers or to limit it to certain things. So it's a very common pattern we see with usage. So that's something we kind of want to emulate in Octant. So the goals here are to combine the logging output from multiple containers. We would tag mark which log lines are from the container. We would provide a list of which container logs are included in the stream. And then also part of this is making sure that we're only sending content when there are new log entries. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about this. Non-goals for this are server-side filtering. I just don't think it's needed right now. And the filtering that Milan is implemented on the front end, I think will be sufficient to handle all of the log filtering needs. And that's something that we can always revisit later, and people can comment on when they go look at this. So our current implementation, so our existing log streaming, in quotes, is done via a log endpoint with a JSON request and or an XHR. What we do is we explicitly register a container logs handler that matches the specific pattern of namespace pod container. And then when we visit the log tab, we generate an XHR matching that pattern, and we send it to Octant. Octant then handles that request and uses it to start the stream to a container log, read all of the entirety of the stream, and then send it back to the endpoint as a JSON response. And when it does that, it actually sends back the entirety of the logging information for each request. There's a polling mechanism that exists within our current implementation on the pod log streamer, and it polls every 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, we're actually reattaching to the container, reopening the stream, consuming the whole stream, and then sending it back over the wire. So it's actually a pretty expensive process the way we're currently doing it. So the new suggested implementation would be that we would create a Sentinel value of all containers, which is actually recommended in the original issue, and I kind of liked that approach. We would create a set of actions that would trigger starting the logging stream, and then we would create a new event type for Octant so that the log stream could be subscribed to via our WebSocket service. So let me talk about a couple things there. Actions are just a way in Octant to send events into Octant from the front end, and that is something that it's an API that we've created, and we use it in multiple places throughout Octant, like for port forwards and for deletes and on the terminal. All of those interactions that you're having with Octant, where you're sending a request to the server and getting some type of reaction back, that's all done through actions. An event type is just an internal type representation for our WebSocket stream, and we use those so that we can subscribe to specific events. We use it. That's how you get subscribed to the component data that renders on the screen. It's how you get subscribed to terminal data that streams into the terminal. We would convert the existing logging mechanism to an event type so that that log data could be placed into the WebSocket stream instead of being sent out over a standard XHR JSON response. We also want to extend our existing log entry to include the container log, or the container that the log entry is from. Currently, it just has the log line as well as a timestamp field. We broke it out into those two fields. It's what allows you to toggle timestamps on and off when you're looking at the log viewer in Octant. This will be adding another field to the log entry, which will be the container that the log entry originated from. So this is what will enable us to support the ability to quickly filter out different containers and multi-select which containers you want to see logs for on the front end side of things. To get deeper into the replacing the current mechanism, I have this subheading about stream aggregation. So the goal here is to get away from where we're sending the entirety of the container logs with each request every 5 seconds, and get to a streaming mechanism where we are writing to the WebSocket when there is a new log line available. Go makes this actually fairly straightforward to do. We will wrap each of the container log streams using a Go routine, and within that we get back these read closers, which is an interface that allows you to read from and close a stream. Go has a mechanism, a built-in mechanism, which is IO multi-reader, which allows you to concat a bunch of readers together and get it all out as one stream. The problem is that we need to be able to identify each line and what container it came from, and that information is not baked into the logs entries that are returned. So we'll have to kind of implement our own multi-reader like function that contains a map of the container ID and the reader that we got back from the stream call. And then we can use that to generate that log entry that I was talking about that has the extra metadata of the container ID. and we can write those entries onto a channel. We can then have a worker loop that is reading that channel and streaming those entries out to the WebSocket client. On the front end, the WebSocket client would be subscribed to that stream, and then it would place those entries into the log viewer, similar to how the terminal works now. Some things for consideration when we're doing stream aggregation is that we need to make sure that the worker loop itself respects any context that's passed in and will properly cancel out streams when navigation changes or the application is being restarted or closed. We also want to make sure that the streams themselves, the close method, is being called on all of the streams should something like context switch or like changing kube config, something like that happens. On the front end, we're going to extend our existing log component so that the data is coming from the WebSocket service instead of redrawing the component every time. Right now, what we do is that when that XHR response comes in, we actually redraw the entire component with the new data in there. And fortunately, Angular hides the redrawing until all of the new data is loaded into the component. But it's still, if you look at some of the timings on that page, it's actually a fairly expensive process, especially as the logs start to grow. So this will kind of move us away from that and get us into similar to how we deal with terminal data, where we send out the big stream of log information that's there, and then you're sitting waiting for new data to come across. And then I touched on this a bit earlier, but we will have a change to the front-end component so that the container selector is defaulted to all containers, and then you would also be able to, it would turn into kind of a multi-select where you could say, I only want to see logs for these 2 containers, or I only want to see log for this 1 container. And so that's the current set of proposed changes to get combined logging in place. This is the last issue that's outstanding for our logging epic, which was to get things updated and more usable for folks. This PR is up right now and publicly visible, 7:33. You can comment on it, make suggestions, reread through it, take the time to go look at the existing logging. I would encourage you to go look at the current code. I put some snippets in here under the stream aggregation and actually called out some of the places where this code currently lives. So you can go take a look at how we're doing things now. And yeah, would just love to get some feedback.
So do you want feedback on the PR there, or?
Yes, yeah, feedback on the PR.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding this proposal?
Great.
Right. If you don't have any questions or concerns, would be awesome if you chimed in with a +1 on the PR.
Yep. That is just as helpful as having concerns is saying like this looks good too. Yeah, we appreciate all of that. So so with that, we'll move on to open Q&A. Milan had the dependency updates in there, but I'm actually gonna go down to the 448 issue first, and then I'll let Milan take the dependency updates. So I wanted to address this, the dashboard still not embeddable stuff. I know we had a quick conversation about it last week, and I see that Andy and Jordan are on the call. So yeah, so I want to know what your current experience is, and I'm curious if the environment variable thing, if you were able to look into that more, or if you hadn't had a chance yet, and and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. So we talked about this a little bit more last week as well for Airship UI, and one of our goals is to create an easy entrance for people who want to use Airship UI. So have like an install script or a Go binary that handles things like plugin installation and running Octant for you, and any additional stuff that comes up around Airship specific things like pointing to an Airship conf. So we looked at what we currently had, and one thing that would make our lives quite a bit easier is being able to, in our main.go essentially, where we run Airship UI, is to be able to execute Octant. Currently, we can't do that, so we run a command line call using Go to run Octant, which is one reason that we were talking about the flags and the environment variables. But if we can just directly embed the dashboard into our Go binary, that becomes quite a bit easier, which led us back to looking at this issue.
I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So really this is the, I see. So y'all have, I'm going to kind of repeat some things just to make sure I understand correctly. So what you've done now is you've kind of worked around the problem by launching Octant as a sub process and passing in a bunch of flags to make sure that you're passing in the data that you want from the Airship, and that Octant, when it starts up, is loading the correct context and has the correct set of information that you want it to start with.
Exactly.
Okay. And so ideally you would like to be able to kind of call that Octant command. I think it's in command.go or command main, that there's that Octant helper function that kind of bundles everything up and starts and just like kickstarts the whole process. And I remember Gary called out that the logger itself has some private fields that prevent it from being passed in because you can't construct one to pass to the actual run command. And so this is circling back to that original issue from back in November of just wanting to get that logger interface with the ability to construct and pass it into the run command so that Octant can be embedded directly into Airship without a sub process.
Yeah, sounds like you summarized that pretty well.
Okay. Yes, we can do this. And yes, we will accept PRs on this. If you all want to take a look at making that modification to the logging interface, I don't see any problem with that.
Okay.
There is, I did mention, if you go back and look at the comment from the 27th, I do want to make sure that we're not exposing our internal logging code, but we're happy to make the actual logging interface and move it, take the logging interface, move it to package so that it can be implemented and passed in and doesn't have the internal dependencies.
Awesome. We'll probably have questions as we take a look at this that we'll probably put in the Slack. But we didn't want to put a whole bunch of work into this if something has changed since we last talked about it. So.
No, yeah, that's what I can do is if you, I can assign myself and you to this issue now, and then that way, if you, as questions or things get, what is it?
Yeah, you had it. It was done. I'm at it. I don't think I've commented specifically on here, so I can go in and.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, yes. The answer is yes.
Sweet. Thanks.
Yeah. And then I will stop sharing and I will hand it over to Milan.
I had the question which relates to our dependency update policy. I don't know, I was working on something and I wanted to use some of the latest features. I think it was Jasmine that's currently at 3.5 and we are still on 2.9. So that made me think, what is our dependency update policy, how often we update, and it's probably just an engineering issue. I just wanted to make sure that everybody in the open source community understands that and maybe provide some suggestions. Yeah,
so right now we don't have a policy. It's one of those things where we're running through, and if a code change requires us to update a dependency, then we update that dependency. We don't really do like we update for security fixes as well. Like when GitHub notifies us that there's a security bug or something like that, then we'll update a dependency. Or if we need access to a new feature or we really want access to something that we don't have now, then we'll do a dependency update. But there's no like scheduled dependency update. So I don't know. I don't really have any opinion on it right now. I think updating to the latest Jasmine is perfectly fine. But obviously your question is a little more broad scope than that. So yeah, open to ideas.
Yeah, the way I've seen it happening, usually there are kind of two school of thoughts here. One is don't bump dependencies so frequently, just do it periodically. Some teams even do it like quarterly or monthly or whatever. And there's a second school of thought that says, well, I want to be up to date as much as possible. And I think on my last project, we even had a step in pipeline that was detecting that some of the dependencies are out of date. So that gave us a red pipeline. So we were kind of forced to do it. And we typically kind of did it once a week, which may seem a little risky, but then actually it's not that much because you have a way more chances to test things earlier and pull back if something is broken. So, but I was just wondering, I don't want to, bump something without having broader consensus.
Excuse me. Yeah. No, I think having some type of mechanism that maybe not. I don't think I would want to block CI right now, but if we could at least get a warning in there that like a little warning that said, hey, these two dependencies are out of date, and then we're like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then eventually it'll say these 10 are out of date, and we'll be like, okay, let's update. So like just having something kind of in our face that's not intrusive, but something that is there that is easy to refer to, I think might be a good step, like a good start. And then once we've tried that out, we can then look at like gating and potentially blocking things if we decide that we want to be more like on the update more frequently side, or if we just want to do it quarterly side or whatever. But I think just getting something in there that is checking is a good first step.
I will add one thing that we generally like to stay with Apache 2 style licenses, either for our direct dependencies or any transitive dependencies under there, just for sort of more liberal usage policy. So just be aware of licenses as dependencies are updated.
I'll also throw one more thing into the ring. So I think in particular with Jasmine, it's a dev dependency. So it's a lot less risk than something that's like a build dependency where we might need to formalize the review process a little bit more. But yeah, I think if we wanted to just update like our testing framework, it should be fairly low impact and it's like any other PR.
Cool, makes sense.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns regarding this?
No, great.
All right.
Do we have any? Let's see. I don't think we have any questions in chat. We covered the outstanding open Q&A. I think we're good.
We're all set. All right. Thank you everyone for joining today. We'll get this uploaded to YouTube shortly. And with that, have a fantastic rest of your week. Talk next week. Bye.